Chair Moore,
Here?
Alder DePaula,
Here.
Ms. Fox,
Here.
Mr. Homburg,
Here.
Ms. Fallett,
Here.
Mr. Chapman,
Here.
Mr. Grice.
Here.
Mr. Stein is excused.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from January 13th?
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second, Brendan. Any corrections, changes, Chris?
On page 4, where second to last paragraph, it talks about, I was talking about the easements. What I was trying to explain, it doesn't read this way. What I was trying to explain is that through the years of our development projects, we used to have no easements from that. Then they started with a 30-foot setback, and then eventually it came to the 75-foot setback, which was always recorded on our plats. And so my question on this property was, is there a actually recorded easement, or is it a wish? And that's why I was recommending they go back and find out if it's like, we like 75 feet, but in this case, we move a building 5 foot off it, and you still got that massive buffer, it probably would cause nothing bad. But the way it reads like I said they had a 30-foot easement, it changed to a 75, and I have no idea what easements are on there. We haven't seen an official document from that.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Okay, seeing nothing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The minutes carry. I think we're going to stick with the order of business tonight. And do we have any appearances this evening? Do we have anyone online that is here for an appearance this evening?
This is Randy Smith. I'm here to listen to the plans that are coming up for the, the property. It's right by the Restore.
Okay,
Can figure out what's going on there. So,
okay, terrific.
At this point, I don't have, I have a couple comments on what we would like out of that property and what we wouldn't like.
Okay.
But,
You can,
that'd be
Randy,
perfect.
you're welcome to either then share those comments during this section, or if you'd like to wait until the public hearing on that particular proposal, you can do that. It's your choice.
I'll wait for the public hearing.
Okay,
Okay,
Terrific.
thanks.
thank you.
I'm Karen Berncott. I'm also here for the same reason as Randy as well, too. I live right across the street from there.
Okay, terrific, thank you. With that, unless there's anyone else that's here to appear during the appearance section, we'll close the appearance section and go to number 6A, public hearing for North Point Development Corp. on the request for approval of a general development plan, GDP, for the site located approximately 1208-1212 East Broadway for a mixed-use development including senior, multifamily, and commercial space. Case number 2-003-2025. Sean, come on up. Welcome.
Yeah,
Back.
thank you. Yes. It's great to be here in person. Again, my apologies for the last meeting and trying to do that while I'm driving down the interstate. I wasn't driving, but nonetheless, I understand that there could be challenges with communication in that type of scenario. So I'm happy to be here. One of the reasons why you're seeing this back so quickly is mainly due to the WIDA application process, which did have a slight change this year, starting this year. In the past, we would apply for tax credits, usually in January, and they let us know about those tax credits, come May. And for that application, we would need to have permissive zoning in place, so a GDP approval. WIDA has changed their process, and now they've started with a pre-application kind of project concept submittal, where they basically want to get an idea of applications that would be coming in around the state, kind of get a first look at those, and then based on some criteria, they whittle down that list of applications and invite some, but not all, project concepts back in for full application. And we did receive word from WIDA last week, Monday, that we had been invited back on this project. So what that means is instead of having to have that GDP for the application in January, we now have to have the GDP in place for that application in the middle to end of March. And based on timing and meeting schedules, it kind of pushed us to come back here to this meeting to kind of keep things on track to get to that WIDA application at the end of March. So based on the feedback that we received on the last meeting, we made a few changes to the plans. One of the things we really tried to do was really activate the open space of the building by putting the amenities on the top floor. We have great views of the lake, the Beltline, and basically the entire city of Monona from our first phase on the 4th floor. And so we thought that if we do have a tighter site, at least buildable, I'm sure we'll talk more about the setbacks. Not our choice, by the way. Tighter site in terms of buildable space, we thought, why not, bring some more attention to the amenities to the top of the building. And we've done this on a handful of our projects. We're finishing up one right now in Sun Prairie where we have the community room on the 4th floor, and it just allows that outdoor space to be connected to the building at a different level, and then we'll provide really nice views of the lake in this type of scenario. We are also still working with CARP-C, trying to figure out, will they allow us some relief from their 75-foot requirements. And my understanding, and we don't have our civil engineers here, but in order for us to get our stormwater permits, we have to adhere to CARP-C's requirements. And they're the ones that are putting in the 75-foot setback. Again, 75 feet is the, no buildings. In between 75 and 30, we can have our stormwater retention ponds and other things of that nature. What we did from the last time we were here to this meeting is we tweaked the building ever so slightly where we're going to be clipping over that 75-foot line towards the
Do you
northwest.
want to pull the slides up for the benefit of the public as well as?
Yeah, that would
benefit
be
of-
great. Sorry,
of
Doug.
The changes from the last meeting?
Yes. So we
That'd be
we basically shifted the building, kind of turned it on its access point, which allowed for us to pull it another 5 feet away from the sidewalk. And then as you can see, towards the northwest side, there's a little bit of a clipping of that 75-foot line. We're in conversations right now with CARP-C to really address if that poses an issue. We don't think it will. CARP-C did allow us a couple of feet of clippage with the patio on our first phase. And we're also, going to be talking with them about improving the area that's closest to that stream, which as of right now is just a paved driveway. And so there's room for significant improvement on the site overall. Can we work together and see what sort of leeway we can get from the 75 feet? So we're really optimistic, but we haven't had a final final word or ruling from CARP-C. So we're still working on that. We also tweaked the entrance to the parking lot, basically lining up the entrance to our phase 1. And so, now anyone who's coming to our building or maybe that commercial site will have to come onto the private drive, drive down that a little while and turn right into the parking lot. By changing that scenario up a little bit, it did give us access to a few more stalls that logically fit into let's say by looking at it, it looks like these are more stalls for the apartment building, and then also kind of gives it one singular parking lot where we're able to maybe have a signed shared parking agreement or a signed access easement to give folks the option to use that lot as well if we need it for overflow. We also submitted a lot of information from our other senior restricted properties. We do have 2 in Dane County. The number of cars that we have at those 2 properties average about 1 car per unit, regardless of unit size. Both of the 2 properties that we have in Dane County split the unit size is down the middle, 50-50. So our one project in Fitchburg is about 100 units. We have 52 bedrooms, 51 bedrooms. We're just a little bit over 100 cars. And then we have a project in McFarland that has, I think, more 2 bedrooms and 1 bedrooms, and that is about 1-to-1 cars as well. That's in Dane County. A few of our senior properties in other counties around the state do not, come to that 1-to-1. It's a little bit below that, but we do feel that the 1-to-1 ratio would be fine. I know that the city, or the village of McFarland has a parking ordinance for buildings that are 55 and over, at 1 car per unit. So it's not out of the question to see other municipalities changing their parking guidelines up for projects that are deemed for households that are 55 and older. The last thing I will say about the parking is, we're in phase 1 for the long haul as well. So we could certainly do a shared parking access agreement to allow our tenants to park in phase 1, if there is a need for that. But in general, we think that the parking is going to be sufficient based on the data that we have. And as a developer, it doesn't behoove us to underpark any site. If you don't have parking for your tenants, they're not going to want to live there. But like I said, we have not seen that, data in any of our portfolio. We also were able to, add with the changing of the parking structure, a gazebo, a larger patio on that first floor. And I think it'll just give us better views of the whole site. I mean, it's going to be a beautiful site once we're able to get, new grass there, remove some of that, the gravel in the driveway, and that whole west side of the building will be green. And, even though we can't build anything on it, that doesn't mean that tenants can't go out there and walk on it, bring their dogs out there, et cetera. And as you'll see, we also tried to connect this building to some of the pathways that we have around phase 1 to allow tenants the access to walk around the buildings, possibly even use the other larger patio if they had a desire to do so. Going back to the parking, I guess I failed to mention, this site is a little bit different than our portfolio because it's mostly 1-bedrooms. As I stated before, a lot of our other projects are a split of 2 bedrooms and 1 bedrooms, about 50% each. This one's very heavily loaded on the 1-bedroom size. So, even if we were to, let's say reduce the unit count, the bedroom count is kind of where the cars come from, in my opinion. So I think, also, as another argument towards why do I feel that we're good with parking, our total bedroom count is not as high as you would typically see on a multifamily development. And then kind of touching a little bit on the commercial piece. Did you have a
No,
question?
I was just going to say, did you want, I was just wondering if whenever you want him to move the slides, just
Oh.
let him know. He doesn't
Yeah.
have to move them at all, but if you want to have him move the slides, anything.
I think you're doing fine. I'll finish up here in a second, and then we can move them as we have follow-up questions. I know that we've worked together on this site for a really long time, so I kind of have a sense as to what some folks would like to see in terms of a commercial component. I believe that phase 1 did turn out really well, and we're happy to see how that turned out. But I also realize that getting to phase 1 was required some work to convince that was an appropriate use. That's why you'll see that our next phase includes this commercial component. Now, we didn't have any real renderings, or anything really more designed for that piece, just because we don't know who that user would be yet. This is a site where if we're able to, get this project to move forward, I think it's going to be highly desirable for, possibly a national credit tenant. We did submit some, propose, buildings that we, see around town. Some things that my partners have done in other communities, whether it be, a coffee shop or a sandwich shop. But as we're able to move this project forward, you would likely see us back here, for a PIP for that site, specifically saying, here's the intended user, here's the architecture that they may, typically use for their types of buildings. And so that's why we don't have as much, meat on the bone for, that parcel in general. But we do know that there, wouldn't be enough space for a drive-through, but we do feel like the parking would be adequate based on zoning to have some sort of, community-based user, or even maybe a national tenant, that might want to go into that spot. So those are the tweaks. I think, you have the renderings and all that stuff from the apartment building in your packets, but certainly here to answer any questions and appreciate you all taking the time to review these materials.
Great. So, Sean, I'm assuming that because you referenced it in terms of moving the building, that one of the things that we brought up at the last visit was having that more green, right, more of a setback on the front side.
Yeah, so the
Right.
building was able to be shifted further away from
Right.
the sidewalk, and then there is a step back now on the south side of the building for the fourth floor community patio.
Right. Okay, great. Terrific. Anybody else from your crew here? Or
I
are
see
you flying
Bob is
solo tonight?
online, or maybe he was.
He is.
He is.
I am on the line.
Yep, so Bob is here online.
Okay.
But otherwise, I think.
Bob, do you have anything to add before we close, unless there's somebody else here to speak on the public hearing?
Other than just, and I apologize if Sean covered this when I stepped out, the setbacks are what are driving this, and we're working with the county on relief on that. We did shift the building back 5 feet off of the sidewalk. So there actually would be a little bit more planting area than even what this rendering is showing. And it seemed as if they might be open to a portion of the building, like a triangular piece, going into the setback, but we're still waiting for direction on that.
Okay, great, thank you. As long as we're here during the public session, I know that public hearing, we did get a contact from a resident that Doug has. Go ahead.
Thank you. So this contact came in today from Deborah Whitehorse from 1200 East Broadway, just to the west of the project site that's under consideration. Unable to attend tonight's meeting, but had some feedback that she wanted to formally express, some concerns to share with the commission. Has been opposed to the project from the beginning due to the lack of the communication regarding her land's role in this development. The fact, additionally, it was shared that given this project is financed by TIF funds, she believes it's the city's duty to ensure that all impacted taxpayers, including herself, are included in the discussion. One of the primary concerns shared in this contact is the shared driveway with the current landowner. She asked for assurances that her access would not be disrupted during or after construction, and if any changes are required, that she should not incur any costs as a result. Additionally, she was looking for clarification on the type of fence being placed around the property. She closed saying it's deeply disappointing to feel excluded from discussions about a development that directly affects us.
Thank you. Anybody else online or in the room for the public hearing portion of this proposal? Okay. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and move to consideration of action for North Point Development Corp. On the request of approval of a GDP General Development Plan for the site located approximately 1208, 1212 East Broadway for mixed-use development, including senior multifamily and commercial space. Case number 2-003-2025. Doug?
Thank you. So the request this evening is for the phased construction of an age-restricted multifamily building and separate freestanding commercial space. The plans are for 55 units of age-restricted low-income housing tax credit units with 1 and 2 bedroom apartments, as well as 2,400 square feet of commercial space. The applicant has already shared sort of some of the reasons here as to why the GDP is being considered at this point, how it relates to the WIDA timing and the review. The property itself is zoned Community Design District, which does allow for the Planned Community Development Framework, the PCD. This offers greater flexibility given the scale of the proposal and allows for a phased approach to the project. The land is listed within the 2016 comp plan, classified both in current as well as future land use for commercial use. This was discussed extensively during the first GDP PIP when the residential use was ultimately approved. Staff does suggest the inclusion of the commercial along East Broadway is important, given the nearby commercial uses, as well as the support that this can provide for the residential and sort of allowing for a walkable use that's nearby. The units, 55 units of age restricted, these would be 42 one-bedroom units as well as 13 two-bedroom units, and these would be available for those earning 30, 50, and 80% of the Dane County area median income. Couple elements that are included in the staff report is Monona's larger than sort of county average proportion of seniors that are aged 65 plus, as well as those that are housing cost burdened, which would be those spending either 30 or 50% of their household income on housing, on rent and utilities. And finally, one of the policies and one of the goals sort of listed within the comprehensive plan is the efficient infill developments that are listed as an objective, and the plan encourages planned mixed-use activity. The lot design and sort of as lot coverage, typically sites are going to be required to cover up to 30% of the site in open green space. These calculations were included with the formal GDP submittal. The residential lot has over 60%, 60, of that being open green space. Those calculations did include sidewalks, patio, walking paths, and the gazebo. Those are not typically included, but certainly even netting those out, I would expect that to still be well in excess of the 30% that would be expected. And again, some of these elements were included as sort of feedback of the commission from the pre-hearing, the walking path, the gazebo.
Your hearing is still good. He's fallen.
Karen, if you could mute yourself while we're, sorry.
No worries. The setbacks were discussed as well, moving the building back further to the west, giving a little bit more relief along the street side there. And again, the discussion is ongoing with COPC about that. Staff did review the documents that we have sort of on file, and it sort of holds consistent with what was expected at phase one, sort of some of the thinking there, but certainly encourage those conversations to continue, most likely prior to the PIP submittal, sort of have that finalized. The applicant discussed the changes that have taken place to circulation with the access for the building, for the residential building, both on the northern and southern ends of the building. The East Broadway entrance being a shared driveway. Again, staff noting the need to retain that access for the adjacent uses and the individual that submitted public comment. One of the notes here is that the proposed existing lot lines to change. It's expected that would need to be done via certified survey map. Again, that could be during the PIP process. And also, just one point to note is that the sidewalks are shown extending along the western side of the private drive. That was a condition of the GDP, and again, sort of enhances the pedestrian access there, sort of to the rest of the amenities that are nearby, but also to East Broadway and some of the services that are there as well. As far as parking, the applicant proposes a total of 68 stalls for phase one on their property, with both 42 of those being covered, 26 of those being surface. There's also the addition of some EV charging facilities, secure bike parking, as well as, of course, the B-cycle just across the street. There is a deficit here of 21 parking stalls when using typical parking standards for Monona. Additionally, there are 19 surface stalls now connected to for the commercial use that are now connected to the proposed residential use. There's opportunity here certainly for shared parking between both the family building to the east as well as the commercial spaces as well. The GDP process does allow for flexibility from city parking standards, and there may be lower demand needed here, as well as, of course, the opportunity for overflow. That's demonstrated both in the application letter, but also in some previous approvals that the city had. Broadway Senior, with the 68 stalls, has about 1.23 stalls per unit. We did look at the heritage approvals, which does sort of include a few different types of accommodations there. That specifically for the independent living component, that was approved at 1 stall per unit. Prior to phase 2 of that development, staff did, and this was before my time, but city staff did look at the parking services there and found that it was about 15 to 20 stalls overparked during the day. And so that information was all included in the staff report, just for reference as well. Architecture and massing, very similar to what was seen previously, relationship absolutely between the building, this building and that across the street. Changes have been made with, of course, the setbacks, but also the addition of that 4th floor amenity space, giving the step back that was requested during the pre-hearing. Commercial space is being discussed. The square footage here is being determined as 2,400 square feet. It also does not show a pickup window, so sort of as thinking about the parameters with which this commercial space would be defined. Those are sort of the elements that I'd be looking at. Examples were also shown of sort of national tenants and some of the architecture there that may be included. The applicant does request an approximate 15-foot height for the building as well, and shares that materials would be a mixture of masonry, composite siding, and aluminum storefront. A landscaping plan was included for the GDP. One thing, certainly the commission may choose to give feedback. This would absolutely be finalized during the PIP. One point to mention here is that the plans for the ratios for the numbers of stalls needed reference surface parking and not those that are covered as well. It would need to be both. In addition to that, just recommend taking an inventory of the existing vegetation on the site, what may remain, what could be incorporated here as well. And just finally, the 30-foot wetland setback that was mentioned there is some, the expectation there, subject to COPC approval. Some of that gravel, some of that sort of impervious surface would potentially be taken out and sort of restored to the more natural setting as well. Plans were shared with department heads, and comments from Fire Chief McMullen were included in there as well. Some improvements to the turnaround, as well as the hydrant there, as well as the BDA, sort of the signal needed for their service as well. So with that, staff does recommend approval of the GDP. A couple findings of fact, as well as conditions of approval, are included in the staff report. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Brendan, do you want to start on this end?
Yeah. You were mentioning this a little bit in your last presentation on the phone. Could you present again about some of the restrictions? You talked about income levels, but the age, because really reinforcing any kind of future use of this building, how it's really only allowable for this particular demographic. How's that structured?
Yeah, so it dabbles into fair housing, which I'm not an expert in. But WIDA, as we've submitted our application, we've submitted an application for households that are 55 and older. And you're allowed to basically have that restriction on your building as long as you keep it in place. And so, all of our financing through WIDA and through others are going to be contingent on this being a building that serves a population that's 55 and above. We have land use restriction agreements in place for the project on many different types of financing that we have. And so those are the things that keep it serving that population. But we have applied to WIDA, and that this building will serve households that are 55 and up.
Does that
Head household.
Does that stay with the building and the property in any event of the property being sold? If you were to sell it to a different developer, how much of that is durable, with the property?
So going back to the land use restriction agreements that will be on the project, the longest one will be from the county, which is a 40-year land use restriction agreement. WIDA will, through the tax credit program, will acquire a 30-year land use restriction agreement. So there are agreements in place to keep it as proposed use, affordable and affordable for seniors for that period of time. I haven't seen one in my tenure. I used to work at WIDA for the state for 15 years prior to joining North Point Development, where you'd see that come up and it would ever change away, because you're serving a certain population. That's what your amenities are are built around, and the clientele that you're hoping to serve in the building. And so I've never really seen a senior building that's been transitioned outside of that population.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I mean, with that sort of durability, I'm satisfied with the parking issues, because that sounds like it really belongs to the property, not necessarily just your exclusive financing, but just for at least that 40-year interval. And this population, in my individual review of the Dane County Strategic Housing Plan, is a pretty critical population that we have an unmet housing need with. So I'm satisfied with the general development plan, and satisfied with the durability of those agreements as it relates to any concerns about parking.
Okay. Thank you. Patrick?
Nothing really to add. Pleased with this proposal. I'm glad that you took information from the last meeting and made some adjustments.
Thank you.
And I think it's a great project for Winona. So.
John?
On page 2 of finding of fact, Doug, I think it says an exception to parking requirements has been granted. Is that true? Is that for this project, or?
So as written by the city standards for parking, we do not have sort of an age restricted or anything like that. So technically, I think it was 19 stalls that it would be underparked by. So it would be, if the commission is comfortable with the GDP as proposed, and that could be reworded, maybe something more about the age restricted nature of it, but I think sort of calling out why the GDP itself was approved, maybe with lower parking than typically, would be included within the ordinance.
As a finding of fact. He's saying if we approved it,
Yep.
we would have to have a finding of fact as to, that it was okay to go less.
Okay, thanks. The triangle piece that you're trying to build over, what if that's not approved? Do you have to come back and move the building 5 feet back? Is that what would happen?
So what I would, and Doug, please correct me if I'm wrong, but tonight we're looking to get approval for a use, for a multifamily use for 55 units. But then we're going to be coming back for the PIP, which would have a lot more detail on design, lighting, landscaping, and where the building is sitting. So, yeah, if there was a...
So it's in flux.
So if CarpC comes back and says absolutely not, we don't want to work with you, and they're not being, I would say, reasonable or logical about, I guess the benefit that this project would bring overall to the environmental corridor that's now there versus, probably 15 years ago. But the environmental corridor that's now there will be kind of improved by this building. We would have to, figure out a way to, again, maybe reshift the building to get it out of that setback, or see what they're willing to do to work with us, and we'll have to figure out a way to make that work that is then approved by this group.
Okay. Turning to the parking, by the way, I have no issue with the use, I have no issue with the architecture, I have no issue with anything except parking. The two projects you referenced in Dane County, the Limerick and the Prairie Creek, which are both your development projects,
Correct.
They both meet the parking requirements of both of those municipalities, correct?
Can I take a step back? So Fitchburg does not have a parking requirement, so they have bicycle parking requirements that we met. There's a lot of bike parking stalls there, but they have no requirements in smart code zoning for parking. So we didn't have to meet any specific requirements for parking there. In McFarland, we did have to meet their parking requirements because we weren't zoned for an age-restricted building. Now, we could have gone and gotten that rezoning, but that project in particular had a lot of neighbor opposition, and so we moved that project forward under the current zoning that was in place, without any changes, and with a conditional use. So that's just basically what we did. Was we went and worked with our management company and got the data of how many cars do we have on site. And again, the other projects we have outside of Dane County have, significant amounts of extra parking space. And so, one of the other things, again, kind of going back to, we have phase one. We also have one side of the private drive that we can legally have people park on. That's not accounted for in our proposal at all, but that would account for about 14 or 15 extra stalls. But, I don't believe that parking is going to be an issue at this project because of what we see in our portfolio.
Okay, so you're saying Fitchburg has no parking requirements?
The smart code zoning did not have a parking requirement. Again, smart code zoning. If we were in a different, zoning code, but what we built that project under was smart code.
Okay. And you said earlier that you're unaware of any land use agreement being changed ever.
Correct.
Okay. Question about this name of the project. Later on, I think we're maybe going to approve or consider approving signage that calls Phase 1 Broadway Lofts.
Mm-hmm.
Throughout this project, Phase 2, it's referred to as Broadway Senior. Will there be a sign proposed later on that says Broadway Senior on the building, do you know, or?
In full disclosure, I don't anticipate the building to be named Broadway Senior.
Okay.
We have had many, it'll probably go on for a long time. The project in McFarland was originally supposed to be called the Waterford. Then the neighbors, asked me to change it to Prairie Point. based on something that they picked, and then we almost got sued because there's a Prairie Point in Middleton for Attic Angel. So now it's Prairie Creek. So sometimes, you know, the name does not stay with the
Sure.
property. And Broadway Lofts did stick with the property because, you know, at the time thought it was cool. And this is just a way to like be able to know which project we're talking about. But I don't foresee us keeping Broadway Senior as the name of the property.
Do you foresee a sign in the future on this building, or don't you
Yeah,
know?
absolutely. We
Okay.
would have signage, but, you know, we would want to get, you know, tax credits in place first and make sure this
Sure.
is a real project before, you know, spending too much time on those, you know, pieces of the puzzle.
Okay, that's all I have.
I also like the project, and I also really appreciate having visited the first phase.
Yeah, thank you for being there.
It sort of helped me envision how it fits into the wetland area, and the patio you put on the first phase is wonderful. And
Thank you.
just being able to walk out there, and it's much more attractive than I guess I would have pictured it. And the fact that you're able to take advantage of the trees that we got through Dane County, I think making the outside part that attractive is really helpful. And I appreciate also your responsiveness to the issues that were raised the last time. How is parking in the first phase work, given that that building's almost totally rented? Are those, I mean, is it full all the time, or it looked like there were vacancies the day we were there, about that
I mean,
time of the day?
so we're about 70% full, maybe 75% at this point in time,
75% in terms of parking, or in terms of
in terms of total occupancy.
total occupancy? Okay.
And so, in my opinion, as I mentioned on the phone, that phase one was also overparked from what we see. I mean, I think a 1.5 to 1 parking ratio for a family building is appropriate, and I think we're at like 1.9. So, you know, one thing that did cross my mind when we, you know, had, you know, 30, 40, 50 people there was that there's enough parking, even though the building's 70% full, to have, you know, 30 or 40 extra cars, you know, there and on site. So we have not seen any issue in terms of parking, you know, there at this point, but we have a few more units to rent.
Okay, and you would formally arrange with your commercial property when that occurs, likely some kind of parking agreement?
I think we could do like a
Hours
shared
and-
access agreement,
Shared-
you know, shared driveway. We'll definitely have to do one for the driveway itself.
Right.
And then in that agreement that we would submit prior to pulling permits, that would be recorded, would allow us, you know, access to have, you know, our tenants be able to park in that lot, probably not vice versa. We could, you know, obviously do that if the commission felt like having some overflow parking the other way made sense, but that's something we could certainly do. And then we could also, you know, put together some sort of, you know, shared access easement to the driveway and the parking lot of phase one for this building.
Yeah, I feel more comfortable, a little smaller difference in the, what we require and what you had, but you got about 6 more in there without, you know, with the changes you made. I also like the fact that you moved the amenities to the top floor. I think that really does take advantage of the view, which was interesting. And even looking the other way toward Monona, it's just an interesting view. It's just nice to have that space used that way. And I think that, you know, it makes sense to me that the parking needs might be less for 55 and older, and just slight discomfort with that stuff. But otherwise, I think everything's pretty much been answered. Landscaping, I guess, you know, we'll be revisiting that with the PIP, but I'd probably like to see more. There will need to be more given the point
Yep.
system that Doug pointed out.
And we far exceeded the points, you know, with our first plan.
Right, we
And,
did.
and there's a lot of opportunity with that green space to do so again. As you had mentioned, we were able to, you know, secure a handful of extra trees from Dane County Tree Canopy.
Right.
You know, we'd see if they'd be willing to work with us again, or if not, just, you know, purchase
Yeah.
additional trees and put them in.
And things that would go in the wetlands, which Rob, when he's here, could have suggestions. All right, that's really it. I generally really like the project. I like the appearance of it, the colors that blend. And even though, you know, we'd always, I do like the additional masonry you have on the first side. I feel like what you've got here is pretty good, so. I'm
Thank you.
comfortable.
Susan, since you were able to attend the opening,
Yes.
would you be so kind as to be on the patio, share your other impressions? Because you went upstairs too,
I
right?
did,
Yeah.
I did, well, yeah, and got to see, it was nice because we were able to see an apartment on the fourth floor, we looked toward the building, and it really is a nice view. The other thing is the lack of beltway sound when you're in the building is, I mean, you've done a phenomenal job with the insulation and that, whole and the design of the building, and it's really beautiful on the inside. And the third floor apartment we were in faced the city, and that's why I say that was another interesting view, and it will be improved with with this building, I think, just in terms of what people are looking at now, so, that'll be an added improvement. Well, I guess, well, I didn't, like, that was the other thing I was surprised about was just the weight room on the way in with the ferry face one, it's beautiful, I mean, we
Yeah.
had more in that than I would have expected to see, it was really nice. The community room, well designed, and so you're just doing such a nice job with the building. I was really impressed with the whole thing. Yeah, and again, just walking out on the patio. I mean, when you're outside, obviously you hear the beltline, but you know, as trees get bigger, there's a little more screening, and it'll be that much nicer looking in the spring and summer when the foliage is there, so.
Right, yeah.
Great, thank you. Corey?
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't make the tour last week, but I don't have much to add. Really like the project. I really appreciate the attention you took to address the comments we had last time. I am comfortable with the parking. I do think it'll be important to get some kind of a shared agreement with the first phase.
Okay.
Because they do look similar. People are gonna park wherever they find a spot.
Yep.
So I think it's gonna happen regardless. I think it would just be more comfortable to do that. And then the only question I have is about the commercial space. You had mentioned something about potentially finding a crediting institution that would go there, but they typically would want a drive-through. And so what we're looking at here doesn't have that drive-through potential.
What I mentioned was like a national credit tenant. So, you know, could it be like a Cousin Subs or like a Grace Coffee? You know, somewhat, not, you know, ideally you would get, you know, a small, maybe local business, but it's also with the location, you know, you could, you know, possibly get, you know, something outside of that. That kind of, what I meant by that is someone who has kind of their own architecture and, you know, architectural requirements for their buildings already in hand, versus us coming up with a design building that they may look at and go, well, that's not really what we do.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I guess my concern is just looking at the findings of fact. We're saying yes to something that doesn't have the drive-through, and I just don't know if that's going to be limiting to who is attracted to that spot, so.
It would certainly, you know, reduce some folks that are very interested in having that drive-through, but we'd like this to be a place where people would come to and stay versus kind of drive through, and you know, use it more as like a place for the people who are living in the neighborhood or, you know, stopping by or driving by on Broadway to both be able to go to.
I think that's great. I appreciate that because I think it would be difficult to get a good queue in there too.
Yeah.
There's just not a lot of space, so I
Correct.
think that's, anyway. So I think it looks great.
Thank you.
Chris?
So Deb Whitehorse, I'm sure you'll be back for, if she has a access agreement, nothing we're doing here changes or can change that.
Yes.
We normally don't go to properties a couple away and start negotiating with them on a project here. Okay. You mentioned that you need CARC approval for your water quality permit. What water quality permit?
So hopefully Bob is still on, but I might be. This is not my strong suit. We have a good team in place, but
The reason I ask is this is a commercial lot in the city of Monona, correct? We don't send those back to CARC. We issue the stormwater permits.
That's correct. And
So
that was how.
CARC wouldn't be issuing this unless, like I said before, is there an easement on here? Is there a 75-foot setback easement that's recorded on the property?
so all I can speak to is phase one, is that you know, in that experience, CARC instilled their 75-foot requirement, which we had to meet, that the city required us also to meet, based on what CARC. So I don't know where the handoff goes from the city of Monona, but we follow whatever the city says, and the city told us we have to adhere to the 75-foot.
I don't believe there's a water quality, the water quality permit is when you're planning, you get a water quality permit from CARPC. When we approve individual lots, show me another one where we've gone to CARPC for a water quality permit. We don't, I mean, we want to work with them, but my whole point of this thing is I don't believe we have that easement here. And even if we did, I think what you're trying to do with CARPC, if they understand the scope of this for a minor intrusion with a building, and the drains don't even go that way, and removing all that hard surface and gravel, it's a huge improvement to the quality in that area and the water quality. So I just don't see that as being any kind of major issue, but I was a little taken aback when you said you needed a water quality permit from them.
I might be speaking out of turn,
I don't
yeah.
believe that's the case.
Bob's appears to be back on because he's taken the,
Nope.
no? Because I thought there was a mute on
was
that
on
is
mute,
now
so.
off. Right. and
Bob,
now
are you
he's
still there?
off mute.
I am still here.
See,
Can you
there go.
speak to the CARPC a little bit more eloquently than I'm able to communicate?
No, actually, you've been hitting it pretty well. This has been something that civil engineer has been having conversations with contact with the at CARPC. I can't say they're necessarily open to the idea, but they're at least entertaining our point on it, and it's being run up the chain there. But
Do you know, Bob, like, what approvals do they provide? Is that through is it DNR approvals that they have to sign off on, or, you know, what I can do is I can.
I'd be speaking out of turn if
find
I
out.
said I knew for certain.
Just check.
I can find out what the roadblock is, and
For
then,
our
you know, yeah,
typical approval, we don't, once it's a platted lot.
yeah, trust
We
me,
don't go back through all those channels.
60 feet would be great.
Okay.
But-
So, right, it's just something that I think
Yeah.
you need to keep in mind.
Okay, I will get what I will do is I'll get the explanation and send that to Doug.
As far as the drive-through, when we're approving a GDP, we're telling you what's allowed on this property, right?
Mhm.
And you have a right to that then. So for us to go through with this and say the drive-through is not allowed, is because right now we don't know how you would make it work. That doesn't
Yep.
preclude you from coming back. If you have a use that has a very low volume in a drive-through, you said, I can make this work here, I can do it on the site. We always have the ability to put that back in, but we don't grant you that right, so you come in with a McDonald's that would never work on the site.
Yep,
Right?
that makes
So
sense.
just so you understand how it works. When we say it doesn't have a drive-through, if you have some national tenant that, man, they've got somebody sits there while their food's being made and they queue 2 cars, clearly you could probably make that work. So,
Right.
just so you understand that part about it. You mentioned the parking on the private drive. There's no parking on the private drive. It even has to be signed for that. And this is a lesson really for Planning Commission. I mean, when they went in, they wanted to minimize the width of that. Well, okay, well, there'd be no parking on it. Well, if it was 2 or 3 foot wider, we could allow parking on one side. We've been out there right now. I'd pace off. It's probably 26 feet plus or minus. You just can't. Our narrowest roads we have in Monona that we allow is 28. It's really tough for any emergency traffic to get through. So when we approved this private drive, we said no parking on it if we make it this narrow. And looking back, if we'd have made it 4 foot wider, we could have put parking down one side, and it would have helped for both sides of the road. But the way it is right now, it's not wide enough. So I saw you put your stalls there in your loading dock, but as you know, when you go out there, if you did anything like that, it'd be a one-way drive. So it's not an option. Now, I'm as concerned about parking as everybody else in here, and so I looked at it. And if you go back for the 89 stalls, it's because you have 2s and 1s. And I said, what if we went back to all the similar parking that we have for 1s? That'd be 1.5 per bedroom. That would take it down to 82 stalls from 89, and we'd still be 14 short. So I looked at the commercial, and for most of the tenants you have in that commercial, you're going to be required to have 10 stalls, give or take. And you've got, what, 18, 19? So there's certainly a possibility for extra stalls there. We have a possibility across the road for some shared stalls. So for me, where we're at right now, and I guess I'm going to go back a step. You said you've checked all your buildings, and you know you've got 1 stall per bedroom, right? And that's what you have? And that's because
Not
you make
per
them
unit.
register, or per unit.
Yeah.
You make them register, right?
Correct.
And that's how you get your count?
Yes, it's the cars that they have registered.
So it
yeah.
doesn't count any visitors. And
Correct.
that's our whole point, is you need room for visitors, especially on holidays and such. So where we get into it is, yeah, everybody in the building can park, but nobody else can park, and you have no parking on the road. So if you're in the middle of a district where there's parking on the streets, it's a lot easier to get by with one per unit. But here, it's tougher because there's nowhere to go. Other than the fact that I believe the way it looks right now, we have shared parking available with the commercial, and I believe we'll have some shared parking available with the building across the road. But I would like to see that then as part of when we talk about what we're doing, one of our finding it back, one reason is because we expect shared parking in both commercial and across the road, which is what you talked about.
Yep.
The reason I say it is so it's in our findings of fact, so it's part of the GDP that we've approved that says, here's what our thinking is. Because the same thing went on with the one you mentioned, Minota, whatever, over on Owen Road. When they came to us with the one, they said, we're gonna have excess parking with our next phase, so we can get by with this because we'll have excess parking for overflow when we did the approval. So, you know, we approved that one. Number one, there's parking on that street, but number two, they assured us when they came with phase two, and they overbuilt. If you look back at it, they overbuilt the parking lot for phase one. They built part of the phase two parking to compensate for it. So that's how we got into it. Landscaping, we've talked about, you know that you need a lot more landscaping.
Yep.
The hydrant, that should have never been left like that. The hydrant's right in the middle of the drive aisle. I can't imagine it got left like that. And then rocks piled outside. When I was there today, the fire department was there with one of their trucks. They'd have a devil of a time turning around there with that intrusion into that drive. So this is not a GDP item, but it's something to be aware of, and since Bob is still on here, that hydrant's going to have to be either extended outside of that or capped. It's just a flushing hydrant. The main hydrant for fire service is 30 feet away behind the curb, the one you need. This one was just put on the end of where they extended the main to. They wanted to get it past the paving, and then they just left the flushing hydrant there. It probably should have been removed, or the line should have been capped, or it should be extended down past where that turnaround is. But in your PIP, you're going to need to address that as well as the paving of that T. And it's not anymore just so a snowplow can turn around for emergency traffic too, like that fire truck that was there today. So that's why that's important. And Chief McMillan was 100% correct when he brought it up, that in the bi-directional lamp. For me, architecturally, it still needs a step back on that south elevation like you did on the north. When you drive in there, you've got 4 stories with no step backs, nothing. It's the building. And I don't know if that would mean necessarily losing a unit, but it might take that 2-bedroom down to a 1-bedroom. But I would just ask your architect when he does the final stuff, take a look at that and what he can do on that south elevation, maybe a little more brick in a few spots. And then you know your approval tonight, it'll be in there, but doesn't include the architectural, those type of things. Although you've given us great renderings, so we know about what you're doing, and you know about what our expectations are, so it really takes the onus off on the PIP. You've put in a lot of the PIP details is what you have. So,
right.
So you know you've got a project that you can build and that we like. I think that's it. That's good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sean, if I could just go back to the neighbors' concerns. Could you just talk through, first, she asked about fencing, and she also asked about access to her driveway, and would anything that you do impact, and looks, I'll let you respond to that.
I mean, we did put in a fence on
Yeah.
phase 1.
Yeah.
I'd have to check with Carp C to see if we're allowed to extend that fence along her property line, and we could use the same material. I think it would make the most sense to kind of add the same style on the other side if we're allowed to go all the way up to the stream. In terms of the shared parking, we would do our shared driveway, we would do our best to make sure that we don't, well, of course, we wouldn't at any point take away her access to use the driveway.
Right, nor
but
would
at some
you at
point,
any point have
Yeah.
fencing on
Right.
her property, I mean, on
Right, yeah,
her property or property line, you'd have it on your
Right, so
property.
anything we do will be on our property, and,
Right.
we would take into consideration that there might be parts of that driveway on our property that she uses, and just coordinate, you know, with her, you know, dates, times, to try to reduce that disruption as much as possible. We're also going to have to at some point demolish the existing, you know, Chief's Auto Parts building. And so, you know, we'll certainly keep her abreast of all of those types of, you know, timelines and things like that.
Okay.
But we would not be impeding her access or taking anything away at any point.
Okay. Great. Just double checking her note. So shared driveway, and their access wouldn't be, and then the fence. So I just wanted to double check on those things, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Chris?
I'm just going to volunteer your information on that. If these plans are correct, it looks like the property line goes right down the middle of your shared access, your driveway off of Broadway.
It does right now.
Yeah.
The
So-
new property line would move up, but,
Well,
sorry, go ahead.
Your property line with Deb Whitehorse wouldn't move unless you made
Yes,
an agreement with
correct,
her.
correct.
And it looks like that property line goes through the middle of your shared access.
It goes through the driveway.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's your shared access. So it goes through the middle of the driveway, is that right?
I believe.
It looks like it does from what we have.
Right, so what I'm saying is that as we're improving that, you know, we would coordinate with her, but she should still be able to have access in and out of the driveway. We'd coordinate to make sure she would still have.
Reason I'm bringing it up is there will be rebuilding of that during construction.
Right.
And it's not up to us, it's up to what your shared driveway access easement reads on who pays for what.
Right.
And if you're improving it, I mean, their access agreement may call for who pays for what when something happens, and
Right.
that's between the two property owners.
Correct.
So there could, she said she doesn't want any cost to go to her. Well, her access agreement will determine that,
Right.
not us.
Right.
We'll check title to see if there
Okay.
is, you know, with, you know, families sharing that property
If there
line.
is any
Right. There may
shared
not
access
be-
agreement.
There might not be one, but.
Currently, right. Yeah.
Typically, what we would do is, you know, obviously anything that, you know, that is our responsibility to put back into its original condition is always going to be on us to do, and obviously any improvements that we're making on our property would be on us as well. So there should not be any, you know, there would not be any costs on Deb Whitehorse for any of the improvements that we're making, and if anything needed to be put back into the original condition, we would cover that and make sure that that took place and communicate with her on that as well.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions for Sean? And if not, I would be happy to take a motion.
I'll move approval of finding of fact 1 and 2 is written by staff, finding of fact 3, at the end of the sentence, the demonstrated decrease in parking demand, comma, shared stalls with the commercial use and shared stalls with phase 1. Add that to the end. And then condition 1, 2, 3 is written by staff, condition 4, an access easement and shared parking agreement must be obtained for the southern parking. And then 5, 6, 7 is written, 8, right after parking allocation and shared parking. So again, it talks to that one speaks to the commercial parking, but that we're including some shared parking with this approval on the commercial property. And that's it.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second? Second. Any other discuss? Yeah, Chris?
Do you have any questions? You've seen what staff wrote, and basically what I've added in is all the shared parking.
Yeah.
But this is being approved based on having no shared parking.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thanks, sir.
Motion carries. Thank you. Don't go too far.
You're next.
Yeah.
You have a
I don't know if I
sign.
can speak to the signs.
Yeah. That takes us to 7A, new business. Public hearing on a request by Broadway Lofts, represented by Sign Master Signs LLC, for approval of a sign permit for one wall sign and one monument sign at 1216 East Broadway, case number #002-2025. Public hearing, do you have your sign person here to speak in any way about the sign? Or are you going to speak in any way about the sign? No?
You know, we engaged sign masters to apply for the permit, and so I was surprised to see us on the agenda. But I'm willing to sit in and.
What color is it?
Blue.
It would be on page 49 for those of you that are on your computers.
I can give an overview.
Yeah.
We had invited the applicants. I don't believe I see them online, so I can just step in. 2 signs being requested for the Broadway Lofts project. This is at 1216 East Broadway, just across the street from what we were just looking at. 2 signs included within this. The first that you see here on the screen is a monument sign. This would be non-illuminated. This is at the northwest corner. So this will be visible as you're entering the site, sort of passing the gas station. That would be one of the first things that you would see. This would be up against the existing stone retaining wall. And just one point to note here, staff has already highlighted the address that needs to be modified, just to correct that as well. So non-illuminated, it is 48 inches, I believe, in height, 4 feet 10. Non-illuminated, facing northwest, just one face on this, right against the retaining wall on the applicant's property. The second is a wall sign here, and I will just zoom in. This is on the main apartment building, specifically same address, and this is, it would have the name of the development. This is illuminated wall sign facing south. This would be 87.4 square feet, LED illuminated channel letters, again visible from the belt line. And you can see information on here about this. This would be sort of below the roof line, just above the 4th floor windows there as well.
Great, thank you. Just for clarity, I'll wait until questions. Anything else that anybody here would like to add before I close the public hearing? No. We can close the public hearing and move to consideration of action on the request by Broadway Lofts, represented by Sign Master Signs LLC, for approval of a sign permit for 1 wall sign and 1 monument sign at 1216 East Broadway, case number S-002-2025. Doug.
Thank you. I won't go into the details of the signs themselves, just as mentioned. This is in the Community Design District, CDD, and the signs would be reviewed based on those standards. As far as the wall sign, the building is accessed via the private drive, does not directly have public street frontage. It is visible from both East Broadway and the Beltline. The proposed sign would be at the southwest corner of the building, overlooking the townhomes facing the Beltline. And the applicant is seeking an exception from the sign code to allow for a wall sign on a building facade which does not abut a public street frontage. There is a future development parcel to the south of the private drive, kind of between this and the Beltline. One example that did come to mind that was quite similar to this proposal is the Traister, now Yahara Terrace. There are 2 wall signs there, with one of those that came back through in 2019, visible from the Beltline, very similar orientation, facing south. The monument sign does meet city standards for square footage, height. It is seeking an exception for it must be 15 feet back from the street curb face. Still trying to pin down a final number, but it is between 12 and 15 feet back. So at most it would be a 3-foot exception that is being requested here. The reason for this is that it abuts right against that retaining wall, and so it is sort of confined by that. The request non-illuminated cabinet is being proposed here, and there would be an installation of landscaping around that. They're included within the rendering, and that's a suggested condition of approval as well. So staff recommends discussion. If approval is recommended tonight, there are 2 findings of fact included, as well as some conditions of approval. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll start down at this end. Chris?
Okay. I don't have any problem with either one. I think they look good. I think we'd like to add a condition on your last finding of fact of end because the road curves away from the sign, because when the sign's there and the road's going like that, you don't need that triangle as severe as you do otherwise, so you actually can see. I sat in that driveway, you see just fine with it there. And as far as a precedence, instead of trace to trace-to, we do allow signs if you're on a navigable waterway for another facade, so that was what we used there. But if you look at like Pier 37, there's a lot of buildings there, and they don't technically front on any road because they've got all the series of private drives in there and all those separate lots. This would be very much like that, and we allowed signs on every one of those buildings. This would be very similar to that, that it's along a private drive, but they still get to have a sign out towards the major road. So I think they're fine. I have no issues with them.
Court?
No further comments.
Nothing to add. Real quick.
Sean?
My only comment is don't forget the one.
Patrick?
No comment.
President?
Well, I mean, I don't really have any like substantive code-related concern. I'm not a particular fan of either of the signs from just the aesthetics of them. I don't know that that's really a basis for anything, but I'll share the comments anyways. That, I don't know, the blue feels a little bit washed out. I don't know, it just doesn't land with a very attractive energy when I see it. This is going to sound really pedantic, but the typefaces themselves, the line weight of the typefaces also feels very, very faint, and the kerning between the characters, again, this is being recorded, somebody else who understands this will hopefully hear this. This is the spacing between the letters, feels a little bit crowded, and that, I don't know, it just doesn't have, I just don't like the presence of the signage. They just feel a little bit, I don't know, limp to me as signs. Both the building sign and the monument sign, little tweaks that could be made, but again, those are just a matter of aesthetics. As far as the code stuff is concerned, I think the signs are fine.
If we were to be able to share some of that feedback with, you know, our design person and the sign masters, do we have the flexibility to make some of those tweaks with approval? Or basically, would it be like some of these other things where I say, okay, we made these tweaks, does it kind of fall in line with feedback that we received?
I think the challenge that I foresee may be less with the cabinet, with the ground sign, because that is sort of a predefined cabinet, whereas the wall sign here, the commission would be sort of considering I think it's 87 point something square foot wall sign, and so any changing of the spacing or anything like that would change that. If it is the commission's will, there could be a condition maybe, you know, sort of not to exceed a certain amount, but I'm not sure that has been done previously.
I don't know that needs to be, because if it fits within our normal parameters, you're here because it's an exception for that wall. If you get approval tonight for that exception, and the exception for the distance on the landscape ground sign, well, the rest of it's really your bailiwick, right? So if there's a minor adjustment to the length of it and it fits within the intent of the code, that would be a staff decision. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, we would certainly be able to take a look at some of these things. I mean, if there's some things we can tweak to make it more attractive, we'd, be able to do that. Now's the time.
Yeah, I would say that it also already looks a little dated.
Okay. Would both?
Yeah,
Okay.
both.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
I'll move approval with findings of fact 1 and 2 as written by staff, except for 2 add-on, and because the road curves away from the driveway. And then conditions of approval as recommended by staff.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Brendan's got a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
All right.
Aye.
You're approved.
Thank you again.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
too.
Okay, that takes us to number 7C, pre-hearing conference for rezoning requests and map amendment from multifamily residence district, Monona Municipal Code of Ordinances, section 48026, to community design district, Monona Municipal Code of Ordinances, section 48030 at 3735 Monona Drive, is requested by the Clean Lakes Alliance, represented by Potter Lawson, Inc., case number 2-007-2025. Welcome, James.
Thank you. Glad to be here. wear a couple different hats here tonight. One, I'm a East Side Club member. I am also representing the Clean Lakes Alliance, as we have a one-year lease with 3 automatic extensions going out 4 years. The idea is to move the Clean Lakes Alliance's offices to part of the East Side Club that I found out that most club members don't know about. The club was built in 1955 and opened in January. They then did a remodel several years later where they added on to the kitchen to the east. Sort of like, no, what it would be, what I would think about, that would be the west, sort of towards Old Brook Park, how about that? And they added on a manager's apartment. And a person lived there, and at some point they stopped living there and they used it for storage. As a club member, we sort of looked at that space. Wouldn't be nice to, use that space rather than it just sort of leaving empty. So we are contracted with Potter & Lawson and C.G. Schmidt, and they went through the process guided by the city of Monona to make sure that we did everything right by code, very forward-facing, to do a cosmetic remodel of that space. And when I say that, I say it's floors, carpeting, paint, ceiling, everything like that, and then adding my associate can talk about the a heating element, because that part of the building doesn't have a heating element. We also had it tested for asbestos. All the idea with is that we wanted to get all the approvals to make sure that before we did anything, that we were not affecting the rest of the building.
Right.
Because the rest of the building has other types of issues just like this space, and we wanted to make sure we got contained to that space. That then, going through those processes, I think we did get conditional approval through the city's engineering partner that everything that we would do would just contain in that space, and we would bring it up to current standards. Then it triggered a second part of it during this process, which we found out, even though there were some conversations, could we just move in without rezoning, or did we have to rezone? And it was determined that we had to rezone, which then that threw the club into a conundrum because of their processes. They mentally have challenges trying to understand all the city processes, from TID district to zoning to all this. And so I think the club at this point is very hesitant to have it remodeled, because they're worried about everything from their outdoor sign to having to put an elevator in the building to when they come before you for music, that somehow the rezoning is going to affect these other club operations. And they're just having a very hard time understanding that, to be frank.
Yeah. Well, just to be clear, it would not.
I completely understand that.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
It's all kind of warm.
Yep. Yep. So, is there anybody else here to speak on this? Would you like to speak on this in any way before we close the pre-hearing?
No, James covered it.
Pretty much covered it. Okay. Okay. That being the case.
Don't we have people online that wanted to talk? Or, well, that's for their.
No, that
okay,
was for the
right.
next item.
It's old. This is old. I'm doing it just the one item.
Yeah, yeah. So with that, I'm going to let Doug speak to this particular proposal.
Thank you. So yes, as mentioned, Clean Lakes Alliance has submitted the request for the rezoning and map amendment for the East Side Club. That is 3735 Monona Drive, and that would be to rezone the approximately 2¼ acre site from its current zoning of multifamily residential to the requested zoning of community design district. The reason for this is the applicant, Clean Lakes Alliance, would like to occupy a portion of the East Side Club, move their office to the property. The request requires a zoning permit and is not permissible under the current multifamily zoning. As shared, the building was built in sort of mid-1950s. There's a little bit of history there. Since then, it has always been occupied by the East Side Club with different names, but it's the same organization throughout. The city staff has seen a copy of the lease between the East Side Club and Clean Lakes that was signed and executed back in September of 2024. Staff has recommended a letter of support acknowledgement from the board come in support of the rezoning, and certainly would like to have that prior to the formal any action taking place. And again, as far as public notice, letters were sent, but we will go through the Class 2 notice that we would have to do for the formal rezoning, which would hold the public hearing as part of the next ahead of the consideration. So the multifamily residence district, as is currently zoned, that is characterized by high-density dwelling units with proximity to commercial developments and major streets. The community design district, as is requested and as staff recommended for the CDD, includes a compatible mix of residential, commercial, industrial, or open space uses, which realize the goals of the comprehensive plan. And the 2016 comp plan, both the current and future land use maps show this as commercial. Staff did have has certainly discussed this with the applicant, but also with the East Side Club, with their vice president, as well as a couple other board members at the same time. Certainly, we are trying to work right now still to sort of organize a meeting with the city attorney, with the applicant, but also with sort of leadership from the East Side Club to try and discuss some of these concerns that they have about what this may mean for the future as well. We were not able to have that in advance of this meeting. Sort of the reasons for putting this on the agenda for the pre-hearing, have this opportunity for the commission to kind of provide some feedback, to the applicant, but also just from a sequencing standpoint, being mindful of the applicant's timeline, but just trying to sort of keep this moving forward, recognizing that there'll most likely still be some conversations, moving forward between the meetings as well.
So I'm a little confused because the one other time that we've seen something from the East Side Club related to this part, well, first of all, I'm kind of surprised it's not CDD already. But beyond that, the one other time we've seen a proposal, it would have had to be rezoned to CDD because they were talking about club with residential above. So it seems to me that that's parallel. Maybe this is just reassurance for the club, but it seems to me that in either case, it would be kind of a parallel scenario. So again, there wouldn't be any reason for the club to worry about this rezoning. It just gives them greater flexibility in the future than they have now, right?
Yes, and that was certainly shared, to the club in that conversation with the vice president, about the process, about what this may mean. Certainly with the way the comprehensive plan is shown, the current, the future land use map, it acknowledges that this, although, that's housing to the south, this is commercial. That is included. At this point, staff would say this is one of the, I think Schwenn's was the most recent example that comes to mind that frankly, an administrative, it's something that you could say, this has been this way the whole time, same as Schwenn's, something that was missed during that previous zoning map. What I would say, and I think as the applicant has shared, is there's some concerns about the process and what this may mean for the future, and that's sort of the reason for that suggested meeting in between, just to make sure that everybody's on the same page as well.
Certainly, I'm happy to open it up for discussion and the rest of the commission and commissioners if you see anything different than I do, but Chris.
Well, I'd like to add some history to it.
Yeah.
But I also want everybody to realize I am a member, so I will abstain from any final voting, and if you think it
did you ever hang out in the apartment?
I'm sorry? I missed that.
No, just being wise. I said, did you ever hang out in the apartment?
Actually, the last time I was there, it was called the Bridal Suite, because that's where, when they had weddings there, that's where the bridal suite was. Yes, so I have been there.
Okay, there you go.
So this is just, as Doug kind of, I'm surprised we even need to involve the city attorney. As Doug alluded to, this is just an administrative gaffe. I was on the subcommittee when we did the last comp plan to do
Yeah.
the zoning map. And when we did the land use maps, and the zoning map, we realized, oh, wait a minute, that one property at the end is the East Side Club, so we don't want multifamily there, that's commercial. So it got changed on the existing land use, it got changed on future land use, and for some reason, it didn't get changed on the zoning map. So this is a gaffe that I would contend in our next comp plan, we would have caught and cleaned up
Yeah.
without even talking to them, because we would put it back to what the use is. So that's my opinion. I will abstain, but all this is an administrative cleanup.
Okay.
Well, this is just a pre-hearing.
Right.
Anyway.
Right.
so, yeah.
Would you, does anybody else have anything to, John?
I think it would be an honor to have your organization in the city of Monona.
I would concur.
Yes.
Where I get confused is, I don't know how a tenant can be making this request. Doesn't the owner of the property need to make the request to have it rezoned?
Technically, we rezoned all these properties, and then we didn't have individual owners. We public noticed it. And technically, I've had it happen to me on properties where I was not very happy. The municipality can rezone your property without even letting you know. It's not proper, I don't think, but it happens.
Yeah.
But you usually don't have a tenant.
James?
Right.
So the Clean Lakes Alliance did inform the club on December 19th, and we got the email from the city about this process. We then, as Doug said, there was a meeting around January 2nd or 3rd with the city and them, and then we also had, I know their attorney has to get involved, because I think their attorney has a different conclusion than the current city of Madison, to make their Monona process. I would suggest working with the Clean Lakes Alliance, any city entity that sort of touches the club, and develop some relationships. I think the club is surprised that they got to be multifamily and not quite sure how they got there, and are, maybe have a little leery of processes. I would actually, I do know that the club president will not be in town the week before the next hearing. So if there's a possibility, I would figure out how to slow the process down for another 30 days and move it, and I'm not sure how you would do this. I would move it out to the April meeting to give some time for, because you have 9 club members, and it's like playing telephone, right? And so one person has that conversation, they talk to another person, and we really want to make sure, at least as the tenant, I want to make sure that the club is very comfortable with this whole process.
Sure.
And if there's any way we can do that, we've already made alternate processes to stay in our location past this date. And so is there anything we can do to make sure that there's a meeting where all parties are concerned can sit down and sort of like walk through this? One of the issues that the club president is not able to meet any day until like after 4:30. Doug was great and hooked up a meeting for a Friday. So I would just like to figure out how to slow down the process. The club also is celebrating their 70 years as the building in Monona. And I think there's a way to also celebrate the building being in Monona. And I want to talk to the mayor about what type of things we could do for them for providing 7 years of culture and philanthropy. I'm not sure how you would do that in your process, but a resolution, but also I think pushing this back instead of a March meeting, pushing maybe the next planning commission to an April meeting, I think would just give everybody a little bit of a release.
Yeah, well, I think as Chris said, this was just something that didn't get changed, because obviously it's commercial, it's not multifamily, and so I think we can all adequately reassure the club that this is but it shouldn't be that big of a deal.
And I think, one of the challenges, as it relates to who is the applicant, who is, how is this coming through, that was one of the reasons for the, seeing the lease, making sure that there is at least the agreement for the use to move forward, and for that to take place. I recognize that it does here sort of get a little bit challenging. I try to make contact with board members and sort of have that agreement, I would say, is probably tricky. And that's where sort of this reassurance and I did have that conversation, and I think there were 3 members ultimately on the call, plus myself. But I would agree that making sure that there's comfort, that this is not, I can certainly speak from the city's perspective, there's nothing untoward here, as has already been shared. This is something that I think we would have caught at some point or another anyway. And frankly, I think CDD offers the most flexibility moving forward. But I'm happy to kind of be, to assist with that and make sure that the board members are comfortable as well.
And to your point, James, I'm sure the current mayor, who happens to be on Zoom tonight, as well as the future mayor, would be happy to discuss something in the club. Anything else that we can do for you tonight?
No, we are excited also to be working with the city of Monona on Loop the Lake, which is Saturday of Father's Day weekend. It's a great community event.
Well, and let me just echo what John said. I think it would be fantastic to have you in Monona, so. Great, thanks very much. Great, with that, we will move to item 7D, public hearing on the request by Scarlet Veterinary Services LLC for approval of a zoning permit for a new vet clinic at 4205 Monona Drive, case number 2-006-2025. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. Chad Ferguson with Keller Design Builders, representing Dr. Lori Scarlett.
Okay.
Listed as Scarlett Veterinary Services and doing business as Four Lakes Veterinary.
Great. Would you like to talk through your proposal a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, the proposal is, tonight we're asking for zoning approval for a veterinary clinic. Dr. Scarlett currently does not own the building, so her terms of her bank, she can't own the building until she gets zoning approval. So that's the process we're in right now. We've been working with her for a few months to develop a plan, which you have in front of you, and the city's reviewed it. No site improvements other than, since this was submitted, we do a bit of asphalt repair, seal that, and strike as requested. But yes, that'll be full service veterinary clinic. Hours are listed in your proposal, 7:30 to 6, Monday through Friday. 14 employees at peak period. And Dr. Scarlett has also worked nearby, about 3 blocks away in the city of Monona, successfully for 12 years, and now wants to invest in, city of Madison now wants to invest in city of Monona. So.
I was just going to say, we kind of like it when people come from Madison to Monona. So, yeah, okay. Great. Anything else or anyone else that would like to speak during the public hearing portion? I know there's a couple of people here tonight. If you are here to speak, Karen or Randy, you're welcome to speak. We limit it to 3 minutes, and the idea is for you to be able to have the complete floor and us to be listening. So if either one of you would like to speak, Karen, would you like to speak, or would you like to continue listening?
I'm just going to continue listening for now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
And I apologize for my dog in the background before. I'm sorry about that.
No problem.
Thank you.
Randy, how about you? Would you like to speak?
Yeah, our biggest concern would just be, noise and smells. With a veterinary clinic, I would not probably be as worried about smells coming from, but would concern I would have, would this just be a daily use facility, or would you see having animals there overnight, which, you know, could pose a noise issue? And then just also, to me, that's just my biggest concern with neighboring properties. And I'll just continue listening now.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, I can answer his questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's gonna be Monday through Friday. The only option would be to do cat boarding at night.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as noise outside, you know, other than walking the dog, that would, you know, that would be it for noise, so we're not,
Okay.
she's not doing exercise. Also, you saw in your packet, she was looking at doing the option of dog training. Right now, she's paused that. So that was where the question was for nights and weekends, and right now, she's not willing to do that.
Okay. Yeah, I believe, Randy, did you hear all of that?
Yes, I did.
Okay,
Yeah.
great, yeah. I believe in the packet, it also says cat boarding only, no dog boarding. Okay. With that, we'll close the public hearing, and we will move to consideration of action on the request by Scarlett Veterinary Services LLC for approval of a zoning permit for a new vet clinic at 4201 to 4205 Monona Drive, case number 2-006-2025. Doug?
Thank you. So this would be a zoning permit request for Four Lakes Vet Clinic to occupy the space 4201, 4205 Monona Drive. The applicant does intend to purchase the building, relocate from Madison into Monona. Building is currently subdivided for 2 tenants and will be remodeled to accommodate the single tenant, and this would allow, the relocation would allow the applicant to expand their business, including more exam rooms, dental care, and the dog, I have listed dog training, but certainly this evening that was shared that is on pause at this point. The building has recently been occupied and is currently occupied by Confectionique and Forward Pharmacy. Certainly Forward Pharmacy has relocated and is in the process of relocating further south. The zoning permit is necessitated by the change in use and building modifications. So the property itself is located within the retail business zoning district, and standards for that should should provide retail trade service as activities serving the community, and it appears that the proposed use is in line with that. The commercial use, the property is listed in both the comprehensive plan, current and future land use as commercial use, and again, this appears to align with that. The adjacent land uses do include retail as well as single-family residential just to, at the back of the building to the west. As far as building modifications, it would mainly be an interior build-out to change this from the 2-tenant to 1 and to allow for the veterinary use. No exterior modifications are planned. From the parking perspective, the zoning code does require retail stores and service uses as well as medical clinics to provide 1 parking stall for every 300 square feet of gross floor area. Building footprint is just over 4,800 square feet, which would necessitate 16 parking stalls. And the property does have 24, with 1 of those being ADA accessible. And the application materials indicate that at least 9 of these stalls will be reserved for patients, with the remaining 15 of those for employees. The applicant anticipates 14 staff members working during peak shifts, and it does look like parking is expected to be sufficient during those normal operating hours. The letter does, the applicant has also shared that they do intend to reach out to the adjacent commercial tenant, Habitat Restore, in case overflow parking may become necessary. One point to discuss was back in 2020, the zoning permit for Confectionique came through, and there was discussion of possibly adding bicycle parking to the site. Previous owner was not interested in doing that. That could be something the commission may choose to discuss as an option to relieve parking challenges here as well. The parking lot is in good condition, but just noted that it was in need of restriping. Pleased to hear that that's already something that's being considered. No landscaping changes are proposed as part of this, no fences or anything like that, and landscaping is in good condition. The lighting, again, no changes for that, and that was also sufficient, deemed sufficient on a site visit. Operating hours, 7:30 to 6, Monday to Friday. Cat boarding overnight, no other patients remaining on site outside of the business hours. Again, just the possibility of dog training was at least mentioned for evening, weekend classes, and that may be something to discuss, possibly considering the zoning permit as well. Signage, there will be changes proposed for that, but they were not shared at this time. With that, the staff recommendation is approval of the zoning permit with the conditions as listed. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris, do you want to start down this end?
I'm sorry.
Do you want to start?
Oh, sure. Number one, I think this is a great use for that building. I think it's awesome. I think sometimes when you have a little isolated area of retail like we do there, it's a little difficult, especially for somebody like Confectionique, to pull people in. Are you aware if they're relocating anywhere?
I am not at this
Okay.
point.
But I think this will be perfect spot for it. The only comment I have, and it's a bit of a pet peeve with me.
All puns intended?
Yeah, not that type of pet. Our shop at our quarry burned down about 20 years ago, and I had to get permits from Madison to rebuild. And the one that really stuck with me is I was required to have a bike rack at a quarry. Now, my alder said, I don't know what they think. They think you're going to bring stones in with a backpack and take them in and out by bike or what, but it was harder to fight that than to put in an isolated bike rack that's never been used. So I'm questioning the bike rack here. If people are going to bring their dog on a leash and ride a bike with it, or if you think that's reasonable, or they're going to put a cat in a backpack, or if it's really necessary to have a bike rack for the vet clinic.
Right.
That's my only question. To me, it was like, really?
I can respond to that.
Yeah.
Maybe. I think part of it, so certainly I remember the 2020 discussion. I think part of that was from it was when Confectionery came through, I think more weekend hours and sort of targeted.
And a pharmacy, and I get it.
Yeah.
So that, I'm just speaking to condition number 6.
Mhm.
Were I sitting there, I'd be saying, really?
Right.
You might have thought that. A bike rack?
It may, the other
So-
thinking just from a staff level was the 14 staff.
Yeah.
If one of those
Okay.
would come by bike.
And they might, and
but-
somebody else here might feel that way.
Yeah.
Thanks.
My staff don't ride bikes.
Right. Got it. Corey?
I mean, I had a similar thought about the bikes as well, just thinking about the patients, but yeah, the staff might ride their bikes. Anyway, I have no issue with the use at all. My only concern, I think talking to Habitat Restore would be really important. I'm glad you're going to do that, because I was at the Restore on Saturday. Their lot was completely full, and they were using the pharmacy lot. So, you know, your hours are going to be different. You're not going to be open on Saturday. I don't think it's that busy during the week there. So, but it might be good just to have that conversation with them, because it is very, very busy
On the weekends.
on the weekends. I mean, I've been there more than just this last Saturday, but this last Saturday was the most insane I had seen it. So
Isn't that the same owner?
I don't know.
Doesn't the same person own
It does?
it? I think so.
Okay.
I think it's the same owner that you'd be
Yeah.
buying the building from.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no other issues. I think it'd be great.
Susan?
I'd agree, it seems like an appropriate use. And I also agree about the bike rack. I wouldn't feel the need to put that in there as a condition. And the only other question was that you're putting the training on pause, but is that something you might want to consider in the future, or, okay, you're really just not going to do it? Okay, I don't see it as an issue. It would just mean there would be weekend parking, which then you might have to have some kind of clarity with your neighbor, but otherwise, no, I think it's great. Yeah.
Sean?
I think it's a great use. Wish you all the best of luck. To keep the bike rack comments going, I think it's probably a blessing that you're moving from Madison, because you'd probably need 90 bike racks.
Okay. Patrick?
I've got nothing to add after that one. I
Brendan?
think it's great I think it's a great addition to Monona. So.
Yeah.
Yep, I'll walk Zeta over. Yeah, I won't need a bike rack either. No, I think it's great. Yeah, and I don't think there's any concern about noise. I go there all the time, and I never notice any sound, even during normal business operations.
Yep.
So.
Great. With that, I will take a motion. Susan?
I would move approval with conditions as written by staff, with the exception of removal of condition 6.
Okay, yep.
Can I just make one request?
Yeah.
Sorry, I should have asked this earlier. The date for parking lot striping was May 31st.
Oh, right.
For construction, we might not be there yet, just so if that could be changed to by the time of occupancy, to when we do the full renovation.
That sounds fine to
That's
me.
reasonable.
So, yeah. So the motion would be to change that date to time of occupancy and eliminate number 6.
Okay, so
Which
I
is the
have a
bike rack.
motion on the floor.
Second.
I have a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Carries.
Thank you.
Welcome to Monona. Okay, that takes us to number 8, reports to staff and commission members, staff report.
Thank you. Just a couple updates for the commission, mainly around the plan commission meetings themselves. We're expecting River Place to return, the multifamily projects down at 100 to 300 River Place. Expecting that most likely at the second meeting in March. The reason I'm bringing that up is we are looking to probably have both meetings in March. So that would be the March 10th and I believe also March 24th. So if you could keep both of those available, I would appreciate it. I will not be here on the 10th, but I think we'll have a couple zoning permits that Assistant Planner Jepson will be working through. We'll still finalize the agenda, but try and keep things moving. Zoning permits for new businesses on both Femrite Drive as well as on Monona Drive as well.
What were the dates again of the March
So it would be March 10th, and then 2 weeks after that, which I think would be the 24th as well.
Okay.
So just kind of regular, both meetings as we used to have for March, if we can, with expecting February 24th will be cancelled as well.
Okay.
And as far as sustainability efforts, we are working to schedule a presentation from SolSmart. This is something that the city, a process that the city went through. They conducted a solar audit of the city's ordinance. They've partnered with other communities in Dane County as well. And they have some recommendations based on that sort of work that they have done, what they have seen here in the city as well, and opportunities for us. So they would like to present to the Plan Commission. At this point, it would just be for an informational presentation, just to share that with the Commission. But I think it would be a good discussion, and then from there we could discuss possible ordinance revisions and such from that. So that's everything that I have.
I would just say that one of the things that we learned from the tour of Broadway Lofts is, Sean mentioned it, but in case you don't know, it's actually one of the most sustainable buildings that's been built. They have solar on the roof. They're actually getting a check from MG&E for that solar. It's so successful, and the whole garage had to be insulated. They have Energy Star certification for the whole building coming through. It's one of the reasons why you can't hear the belt line inside the building either. It's pretty amazing. And I mention it because one of the other things that we discovered is when we took a tour in the garage below the building, there were cars plugged in to the EV stations. And they were both in use. There's 2 of them, and they were both in use by residents. And Sean pointed out, I mentioned something about the Plan Commission doing a lot of due diligence around at least encouraging people to rough in. And he said, well, my gosh, make sure that you let people know that it's not just about roughing in for the plug-ins, but that that he had to have a whole special electrical service brought in for it as well. And so it makes me worry that, those people that are roughing in will never do anything beyond that. So I bring it up again because I do think as long as we're continuing to build flat buildings, flat roof buildings in Monona, that we might want to consider. I mean, the fact that there were 2 EVs from residents there, and that's a, affordable housing. I mean, there's some market rate units there too, but it just made me realize, we may be behind the 8 ball there, and might want to consider, just tossing it out there, we might want to consider having some more substantial ordinances around things like roughing in or solar or whatever, because there's lots of options available. Well, I don't know how long they'll be available, given the national situation, but I mean,
Are they required?
they're not required.
Why not?
That's my question. Right.
Is
Our
it free?
current ordinances don't require.
Is it
any of
free at the location? Do you know?
I believe it is.
I think it is.
I
I'm not
believe
sure.
it is, yeah, yeah. So we've been good, we've been really good, this body has been very good about encouraging developers to rough in parking lots and rough in apartment buildings, but we, we haven't really advocated for PACE financing or encouraging developers to put solar on the roof. And the fact that Sean was getting, he's paying for all the electrical, for the common space electrical with the solar he's got, and getting a check back from MGE, which says a lot about efficiency, I think. Just throw it out there.
The city of Madison requires them.
Yeah,
A quite significant number that's going to dramatically increase next year,
yeah.
just for what it's worth.
For EV or solar or both?
EV, sorry.
Okay, EV, yeah. Well, I remember, 5 or 6 years ago when Josh Peterson was on the commission and we started talking about this, and, and I was certainly, because at that time I think I was chair of the Sustainability Committee as well, and so I was certainly aware of the pipeline of vehicles in the United States, which is still below what's happening in the rest of the world. And I was talking about it, but we still weren't sure if we were kind of there yet, right, as in this area. And then Josh Peterson, who works for American Family, all in real estate all over the country, construction director all over the country, said they're putting in stations in every single piece of real estate that American Family owned. And so it was a real wake-up call, I think, for all of us to start talking to developers about it. So, yeah.
Does Madison do it based on a ratio of stalls, for example, in underground parking, a certain percentage?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, but it's dramatically going to increase the requirements.
Yeah, but it would be nice, Doug, if we could get that information.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I'm gonna look into that, yeah.
That'd be great.
Just don't look at their bikes.
Okay. I think that's all I have too. Does anybody have a motion to adjourn?
Move adjourn.
Okay, second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.